Hi there, Chris from TotallyEV, and here we're doing a dedicated audio review on the BMW iX3. If you want a detailed review of the vehicle itself, do check it up on your pop-up banner, down in the description below or in the pinned comments. Now, we're going to talk about its audio configuration for starters. Now, the model we've got over here is the Premier Edition Pro, or indeed the M Sport Pro, which have a 16-speaker Harman Kardon audio system that outputs 600 watts. Now, if you don't go for the Pro Edition models, what you'll find is around 100 watts, and I don't have the speaker configuration at time of filming, although I'll make sure to pop it down in the written review, which can be found down in the description below once I get that information from BMW. Now, in terms of the configuration as to what is found within the Harman Kardon audio system, I'm going to have to rely to my notes because 16 speakers is a little bit hard to remember on top of your head. Now, at the front, in terms of the center, you have got a tweeter and a mid-range speaker, and in terms of the doors, at the front you've got two tweeters within the mirror triangles, two mid-range speakers in the front door trims, and at the rear you have got two mid-range drivers within the door trims, two central bass speakers underneath the front seats, and then you've got two tweeters in the rear doors and two mid-range speakers in the D-pillars, and also two tweeters as well. As you can see, there's a plethora of different audio drivers throughout the cabin, and it's pretty impressive to say the least that Harman Kardon / BMW have integrated so many audio drivers within the iX3. Now, for you to tinker around with the audio drivers, you can navigate to the appropriate menu on the 10.25-inch display. Now, first off, I have enabled the Logic 7 surround because I felt that added a little bit more dynamism throughout the cabin, but of course you might want to disable it if you want a more reference sound. As such, I've taken one notch off the surround EQ purely because it does add a slightly odd reverb which takes away from the overall accuracy if you leave it in terms of its default configuration. Now, as for the treble, I've added a few notches and wanted a bass and left the balance and fader at default. Now, then there's the equalizer. Now, here there's a 7-band equalizer, which is actually pretty impressive to say the least. Here you can customize a different frequency range. So you've got the 100 Hz, which I've added one notch by. I have left the 200 Hz pretty much default, or added one notch to that. Added a few notches to the 500 Hz, then left the 1 kHz at default. Added a few notches to 2 kHz, same for 5 kHz, and then as for 10 kHz as well, I've added an extra notch over there as well, which means that, well, you've got quite a degree of adjustments, and of course, depending on your own music taste or preference, you can customize it to your own liking. Now, in case you're wondering, the bass and treble EQs on either end of this equalizer spectrum effectively allows you to shift the entire frequency range, so another entire treble or entire bass frequency. Of course, you don't have to do that. I have added it just so that I have, well, less adjustments to go through, but you can leave it in terms of its default configuration, then adjust every single frequency band individually, and therefore not touching the bass or treble EQ. Hopefully I'm making sense. If you've got more questions, ask me down in the comment section below. Now, for you to connect up to the infotainment system, there's Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which can be accessed via a wired or wireless format, the former being the better out of the two. Elsewhere, you do have Bluetooth, where the AAC and SBC codecs are supported, SBC being the lower tier codec out of the two there, but truthfully I would suggest most people to connect over a wire and therefore get the best audio experience. Now, before getting onto a sound demo, I should also mention cabin noise. Now, here the Premier Edition Pro or M Sport Pro has acoustic glazing, and that makes the interior cabin noise extremely minimal, be it from road noise or from wind deflecting or indeed from environmental noise around you. Now, using a sound meter, I measured 35 dBA at a standstill, 52 while driving between 20 and 30 miles an hour, 57 at 40, and a staggering 62 dBA, which is very low, while driving at 70 miles an hour. So with that all in consideration, let's get onto the sound demo. I'll be placing the camera and microphone in 4 separate positions and playing back a song. It's from Priya J. It's titled Falling. In case you're interested in hearing it for yourself, do check it down in the description below.
You should hide, then learn how to fly. It's the only way you know how to play this game to success. I'm not quite sussed it yet. When I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always think, and now I'm thinking my imagination is constantly racing 1,000 miles ahead. I'm living in my own mind, but it's floating. I'm always hoping. When I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always think, and now I'm
Now, while an audio demo over YouTube isn't quite ideal, let's get onto my subjective opinion. And first off, let's talk about that sub-bass response. Now here, despite it having bass drivers positioned under the two front seats, I do feel that it does somewhat cut off towards the low-end tones, and it can't quite compete with systems that have a dedicated subwoofer in the boot. And here, for example, the Kia Soul EV, which also has a Harman Kardon audio system, does a better job in this frequency range. Now, on the flip side, the iX3 does a phenomenal job throughout the mid-bass tones. It's pretty much perfect. I have no issues whatsoever, both in terms of control and quantity, and also in terms of the quality that you get. It's absolutely perfect, both at the front and at the rear of the cabin, given the fact you've got those mid-range drivers and of course the bass drivers at the front as well. It just adds to the overall experience and also gives you that kind of lively sound signature. Now, as for the mids, they are a little bit pushed back, and not to the extent where they're completely drowned out and vocals just won't come alive. And indeed, you can EQ it to a certain degree through the infotainment system, but you will want to refrain from adding too much to the mid-range frequency bands, purely because it does detract from the overall accuracy. So as such, let's say Priya's vocals won't come across as as a song or artist would intend. So in this respect, I do feel that it's got that classic Harman Kardon sound signature. So if you're used to it, I think you'll find it pleasantly fine. If you are someone who is listening to more classical or let's say more vocal tracks, then you might feel that there was a little bit missing in the mid-range tones. Now, as for the highs, I do feel they're absolutely excellent, both again at the front or at the rear of the cabin. Due to the fact you've got dedicated tweeters positioned throughout the cabin, it makes it for a very lively experience, and therefore gives you all those crystal cymbals at the top end, and it doesn't feel like you're missing out. Furthermore, I should also mention here that it doesn't sound harsh or sibilant, at least not to my ears, even though I added quite a few extra notches through the treble EQ. And finally, we get onto its soundstage, which is a little bit of a hard one to analyze and review. And the reason I say that is because if you were to leave the Logic 7 surround disabled, you'll feel that the airiness and spaciousness isn't quite there, and it almost feels like the entire 16 speakers system isn't being quite engaged. I'd go as far as saying it feels like almost half the speakers are being used in this domain. Now, when you do enable the Logic 7 surround, you do get a far better audio experience, but at the cost of getting a little less accuracy, whereby there is that little odd reverb that I mentioned before when I was going through my EQ settings. And as such here, it really depends in terms of, well, the type of individual you are. If you want a little spacious sound and you want a slightly less reference sound, then enable the Logic 7 surround. But if you want a real reference sound from the Harman Kardon audio system, then you won't want the Logic 7 surround enabled at all. So it really depends in terms of what you want. Now, despite me being quite analytical of audio systems, I still did leave it enabled and then just reduced one notch off the surround EQ, and therefore it meant that there was a very slight amount of reverb, but not to the point where I felt like it was overly noticeable. Whereas when I did dial up the surround EQ, I did suddenly find that that reverb did just take away from what the song was supposed to be. So for example, when I was comparing it to reference headphones or earphones or hi-fi systems at home, I really could tell the difference when I was sitting in the iX3. Now, aside from the kind of airiness and spaciousness of the surround sound system, I should also mention that the instrument separation is absolutely phenomenal. It's spot on, there's no issues whatsoever. And better still, your rear occupants will also get a phenomenal audio experience, because the audio configuration at the back is similarly impressive as it is at the front. So therefore there's no sort of missing out if you're sitting at the back of the cabin. So even though you want a shotgun sitting at the front, if you're a passenger, I don't think you're going to mind when it comes to the audio listening experience. So what are my overall thoughts of the Harman Kardon audio system that's comprised within the BMW iX3? Well, it's a little bit of a hard one to pin down. There's some pros and some cons, but then if you consider the fact that the Harman Kardon audio system comes as standard and doesn't include an additional option or anything like that in every pro level trim, in other words the M Sport Pro or the Premier Edition Pro, and then you consider the price difference that the Premier Edition Pro has in comparison to the non-Pro variant, which is about £3,000, and the additional extras that you also get, so for example like a head-up display, some advanced safety features as well, and then of course the Harman Kardon audio system, well, it makes it all that easy to recommend. In other words, if you're an audiophile and you want increased audio output from 100 watts up to 600 watts and you want that 16 audio driver configuration, well, the Harman Kardon audio system is quite easy to recommend. Now nevertheless, it is worth bearing in mind that it does have a few faults, and therefore I can't quite award awarded our Best Buy award, but I can say that it is a high performance audio system, and as such, well, conveniently gets our performance award. Now I'd be intrigued to hear your thoughts of the Harman Kardon audio system, or indeed the stock audio system found in the non-pro variants of the iX3. Of course, if you've heard it or demoed it, do let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you've enjoyed this video, definitely do drop a like, and if you want to see more independent and honest reviews like this one, definitely do consider subscribing if you haven't already and hitting that bell notification. Alright, so hopefully I'll see you in the next one. I've been Chris from TotallyEV. Take care and goodbye.